I think we can succeed. And maybe that day is coming. When? Hindi ko po alam. I'd like to think that it's still coming and in our lifetime ay marahil masulyapan natin yung ganong klaseng pamumuhay dito sa ating bansa. Mula naman sa 0919-691-7734 sa ating suki na si Nards Romero of Angeles City. Kare, in the holy power of CDF and PDAF, who else are next? The remaining GMA appointees, Supreme Court justices, should resign en masse, not as a sign of submission but a protest to this blatant assault on the independence of the judiciary. By hook or by crook, the remaining GMA-appointed justices will suffer the same fate at malamang hihimas pa sila ng rehas na bakal unless they will convert themselves into a yellow justices. Watch for the yellow army to pressure the other senators into voting against Corona in the impeachment. JPE is powerless. Ang laging banta sa kanya, there will be a coup d'etat against him by the yellow senators. Alam po ninyo, we might as well tackle the bull by the horns, ano? Kasi po, an impeachment process is fundamentally a political process. Okay? It's a political action. It is not, they are not bound by any rule of evidence, and certainly they are not bound to make their judgments based on the strict rules of evidence, let's say, na siyang applicable in a court of law. And then times, the judgments are made by political affiliation rather than whether the accusations are valid or not, a misrepresentation, an exaggeration, or whether it's truthful. So dito natin nakikita that what happened in the lower house was fundamentally a political action. It has nothing to do whether those charges are valid or not. Of course, the one thing that sometimes people ask is, bakit naman nila minadali? Hindi man lang nagpag-usapan, hindi man lang napagdebatihan na yung marahil yung iba naman na kontra dun sa kagustuhan ng impeachment, hindi man lang binigyan ng pagkakataon magsalita para makita ng taong bayan ang pagpapalitan ng ideya kung ano sinasabi ng isang hanay dito at ano sinasabi naman ng kabila. Para pag nagkaroon at saka magbigyan ang mga miyembro ng Kongreso ng pagkakataon na ipaliwanag ang kanilang pag-ayon o pagtutol doon sa motion for impeachment. Pero biniglang masyado sa loob ng ilang oras, napirmahan na. Wala man lang plenary discussion, wala man lang ng pagdedebate. But hindi nakakalungkot po na yun ay hindi ginawa. But hindi ko sinasabi na walang base yung kanilang impeachment. Pero po, yun, medyo binasa nga din natin yung mga impeachment comments nila, kung ano nga yun. And the conclusion of some is that medyo problemado yung ilan na mga provision doon. Like for example, one of the provisions there is hindi raw nagpa-file ng Statement of Assets and Liabilities si Supreme Court Justice Corona. And, of course, pinabulaan niya ni Supreme Court Justice Corona at sabi, no, I am faithfully filing my Statement of Assets and Liabilities annually. So, is it true or is it not true? Maybe they were a little too hasty, but there are about 8 or 9 grounds for the impeachment, most of which are conclusions regarding motivations of judgment. Well, tingnan natin kung ano mangyayari sa Senado. Okay? From 0946-6688-146, Kenneth Suryaga of Malang, Cotabato. Sana po, imbis na mag-away, magtulungan na lang para sa ikauunlad ng bayan. Dapat magmahalan at magbigayan. Well, alam po ninyo, the independence of these two branches of government, the executive and the judiciary, means that while they can be somewhat cooperative, they cannot compromise, especially the judiciary, their independence of judgment and their understanding and interpretation of the law. Tayo ay nasa sa ilalim ng isang demokrasya, and the framework of government is that they are co-equal. And that in the interpretation of what the law says or what the Constitution means, the final arbiter is still the Supreme Court. Now, ang sinasabi dito ng palasyo, binabakbakan lang nila si Supreme Court Justice Corona. Pero lahat ng judgment po ng Supreme Court ay all the justices participate. Hindi lang naman si Justice Corona ang nagbibigay ng kanyang sariling judgment here. At hindi ko naman maaari ding sabihin at wala naman tayong makikitang anumang pruweba dyan na marahil pwedeng tingnan ng anumang korte na siya ang nagdidikta ng kanyang opinion sa lahat ng mga ibang justices sa Supreme Court, sa mga associate justice. I believe that once they are appointed to the court, each justice is accountable for their actions and their decisions that they should arrive at independently based on their own understanding of the circumstances of the case and the applicability of certain laws that are involved in that case. Now, tama ba palagi ang Supreme Court? Of course not. Human justice will always be fallible. Maniwala po kayo sa akin, marami diyang nasa munting lupa are innocent, but there are also many who are guilty. And the principle under law is to be found guilty beyond reasonable doubt by evidence in accordance with the principles of and rules of evidence para sa ating mga korte. At pagkatapos ng masusing paglilitis, okay, you and I are not supposed to make any kind of judgment, ano man ang damdamin natin. Ano man ang iniisip natin, naku, ito tao, itong guilty, ito gusto kong dikdikin. Oops, wait a minute. Hindi ikaw ang husgado eh. Kanya meron tayong courts of law. That's why we have very specific rules on evidence. This is why we have an opposing counsel and a prosecuting counsel. Kanya po dyan nagkakaroon sa hukuman. Ngayon, anong nangyayari dito? Ang nakaka-problema dito, ano man ang sabihin mo dito, hindi maaari na sino man na wala sa ating mga korte ang maaaring maging husgado ng mga husgado when it comes to what is right or wrong under the law. Maski na ikaw ay mataas, na may tungkuling napakataas, that is where nagmumula yung ating prinsipyo sa isang demokrasya called the rule of law. I may disagree with the Supreme Court Justice. I may disagree with the decisions of the other justices in the Supreme Court, and many of us disagree. And I will have to tell you that perhaps in the past, napakadaming nangyayari sa Korte Suprema na talagang marami din naman ang nagdududa ng ganito at na ganon, na nalalagyan dito at nalalagyan ganon. Pero hanggang hindi po napapatunayan yan. Kapag tayo ay lalabag, kapag tayo ay tututol at sa pagkatapos babanatan natin ng Korte Suprema na wala naman tayong maiharap na talagang ebidensya, ay para po tayong namimiligro doon. Okay? From 0929-767-9125, dapat higpitan at lagyan ng ipin ang batas. At sa dami po ng batas natin, napakadami na dyan. But I agree with you that there are some laws that maybe need to be strengthened and revised. One of them is the election sabotage law because there are many infirmities that are in the law even if it is not necessarily non-constitutional. I mean, even if it's constitutional, there are many provisions of that law which need to be examined and reviewed. Okay? So, bago lang po tayo magpatuloy, sinisignal na ako dito, meron lang tayong ilang paalala. Huwag sana kayong mawawala, babalik tayo agad. Diyos. Okay, balik po tayo from 0917-605-5739. Yung mga